and welcome to the July 2023 edition of KRAD Readings. I am Keith R.A. DeCandido, here to once again read my stuff. The weird noise you hear in the background is my air conditioner. It's a bit old and decrepit. We're probably going to replace it soon, but we haven't yet, and it's 90 degrees outside, so I am not turning the thing off. You should still be able to hear me. I tested this and it was fine. I mean, you can hear the noise there, but you'll not notice it after a while. Anyhow, welcome to this month's edition. This month and next month, I am going to be doing my two newest short stories, which both had summer 2023 releases. Before I get into that, let me remind you once again to please follow me online at DeCandido.net, and in particular, if you would support my Patreon, that would be awesome. Patreon.com/crad. Most recently, I did reviews of a bunch of really cool things, including a roundup of a bunch of TV shows, including Peacemaker, Unstable, Mayans MC, and another one that I blanked on, which is embarrassing. And I also did a review of all three Creed movies, starring Michael B. Jordan, and vignettes featuring the Super City Cops, and other of my original characters. There's weekly excerpts from my works in progress, including the new Star Trek fiction I've been writing. Lots of pictures of not only our cats, but also other people's cats, and the occasional dog, and lots of good stuff. So please, consider supporting my Patreon. It is anywhere from $1 a month to $20 a month, depending on how much stuff you want, and it's really cool. Plus, you can also follow me online at decandido.wordpress.com. On Facebook under Keith DeCandido or Keith R.A. DeCandido. I'm not accepting friend requests at this point on Facebook, but you can follow me or you can like my fan page. They all have the same content. And I'm still on Twitter, at least for the time being. Kradec, K-R-A-D-E-C. I'm on Instagram at KRAD418. I haven't joined any of the other social media that have popped up. I'm waiting to see which ones actually get people on them. Which is pretty much what I did with everything else, too, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, this month saw two releases. One which I'll get to next week is a Sherlock Holmes anthology called Cases by Candlelight, Volume 2, and I'll talk more about that next week. This week I am talking about Double Trouble, an anthology of two-fisted team-ups. This is the second anthology published by the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, of which I am a proud member. The anthology was edited jointly by myself and New York Times bestselling author Jonathan Maberry, who is also the president of the IAMTW. And it features a whole bunch of stories that take classic characters and team them up. Things like Prospero teaming up with Don Quixote de la Mancha. Like Jekyll and Hyde going up against Dracula, and all of them going up against John Henry. Captain Nemo meeting Frankenstein's monster. Jane Austen's Lydia Bennet meeting John Polidori's vampire Lord Ruthven. Lots of stuff. We've got characters from all over the map, from history, from mythology, and from classic literature. My story is called Know Thyself, Deathless, and it features the protagonist from H. Rider Haggard's 1888 novel She, a woman known as Ayesha, or She Who Must Be Obeyed, and also Egungun-oya, who is a goddess from the Yoruba pantheon of Western Africa. And people in Western Africa, as well as Haiti, worship her. I've actually written both characters before. Ayesha was the main character in a story I did in the IAMTW's previous anthology, Turning the Tide, for a story called In Earth and Sky and Sea, Strange Things There Be, which I've read in an earlier edition of this reading series on this channel. And then Egungun-oya is a supporting character in my 2019 urban fantasy novel, A Furnace Sealed. And she will actually be back in the third Ram Goldbug, which as yet does not have a title. But rest assured, she will be in it. Anyway, without further ado, here is Know Thyself, Deathless. Philadelphia was rocked today by the bombing of a building on Germantown Avenue. The three-story structure was the home of the Banks Community Center, the Kusoma Bookstore, and the Philadelphia offices of Yaddy Industries. The bookstore was closed at the time of the bombing, as were the Yaddy offices, but the community center was open and occupied. While no official casualty figures have been released, Channel 6 Action News has learned that at least one person was declared dead at the scene, and approximately a dozen more were taken to Temple University Hospital. We'll have more on this story as it develops. It's kind of unfortunate that the first thing that went through my head when I found out about the bombing was wondering how the hell I was going to explain how Ayesha survived it. The woman everyone knew as Ayesha Yadi was the owner of Yadi Industries. She was also the absolute monarch of the free nation of Kor in Africa, a country that had been hidden from the rest of the world for a long time, but which came out of hiding in 2004. Don't make yourself crazy trying to figure out how a free nation has an absolute monarch. I've been having that same argument with Ayesha since I became her chief of security, which happened right after Kor's coming out party. Before that, I was a federal agent who'd spent years pursuing Ayesha Yadi before finally capturing her in 2002. That's when I found out that Ayesha wasn't just the latest queen of Kor. She'd been the only one for hundreds of years. Ayesha was immortal. I didn't believe it either. But between when I arrested her in 2002 and now in 2017, I've seen her recover from a fatal broken neck, from having her throat slit, and from getting shot 4 times. Twice in the chest, once in the thigh, and once in the head. People trying to kill her wasn't new, which was why she needed me to be in charge of her security. By the time I got to Temple University Hospital, having been helicoptered to Philly from New York, Ayesha had been admitted to the hospital proper and gotten a private room. A uniformed officer from Philly PD was sitting outside the rear room reading today's Inquirer. As I approached, he stood up. "Can I help you, ma'am?" He was a short, stout black man with a shaved head and a silver stubble. His nameplate read Tafoya. "Officer Tafoya, I'm Francesca Lamana, Ms. Yadi's head of security." "I need to see some ID, please, ma'am." I appreciated the professionalism. Why he was using it, not so much. As I dug my license, my business card, and my concealed carry permit out of my purse, I asked, "Is my employer a suspect, Officer Tafoya?" "No, ma'am," he said, as he took all 3 pieces of ID. "All the bombing victims are under guard." "Why?" For the first time, Tafoya cracked a smile. "You'd have to ask my sergeant, ma'am. I'm just doing what I'm told." I get that. I used to be FBI, and I was NYPD before that. Tafoya nodded and gave me my stuff back. That explains the concealed carry. I figured my shoulder holster was going to be the subject of your next request. "Your boss is still comatose," Tafoya said, snatching the newspaper off the chair and retaking his seat. "But you can go in, though she won't be much good for conversation." "That's fine. Probably the first time talking to her, I'll actually get a word in." Tafoya chuckled. As I approached the door, I asked one last question. "Anyone else been by to see you?" "No visitors, ma'am, except for you. Only folks gone in otherwise are wearing scrubs." I smiled at the officer. "Thanks." Nodding, Tafoya reopened the paper with a crinkly snap. I entered, closed the door behind me, and walked past the commode into the main part of the room. There was only one bed, and the privacy curtain was half drawn. I could hear the telltale beeps of the monitoring equipment. There was a television mounted to the wall opposite the bed, currently off, and on the far wall, a window with a view of Ontario Street. Pulling the curtain aside, I saw a black woman with her hair contained by a purple snood standing over the bed. She wore a red and orange dress with a pattern of flames and black boots. I immediately pulled out my 9mm. "Do not move!" No way this lady was a doctor or a nurse. With a quick glance, I looked down at the bed itself and saw Ayesha. The woman once referred to as she who must be obeyed lay on the bed, thin tubes in her arm and upper nose, and a thick intubation tube in her mouth. She looked weird enough that way, but it was even weirder to see her bald head. She kept her scalp shaved, preferring specially made wigs. But that was also what she was supposed to look like, so whatever purple snood lady was, she hadn't done anything to her. Yet. "Back away from the bed," I said. Putting her hands on her hips, Purple Snood Lady spoke with a lilting, beautiful, slightly accented voice. "I will do no such thing, and put that away, please. I have no interest in mortal trifles." That was an interesting choice of adjectives to modify trifles, especially given the millennia-old woman in the hospital bed. "How'd you get in here?" I asked without lowering my weapon. "Few places are closed to me." That doesn't really answer my question. She ignored that and moved closer to the bed. "I said, back away from the bed!" Raising her arms over Ayesha's prone form, she said, "My interest in what you say is all but non-existent, Francesca Lamana. My interest in what you do will only rise above that if you interfere. How the fuck do you know my name? Now she smirked a bit. As I said, few places are closed to me. Then her face clouded over with what appeared to be anger. Now leave me be, please, Francesca Lamano. Can't do that, sorry. But now she was staring down at Ayesha's form, looking very confused. This cannot be. Still pointing my 9 right at her face, I asked, what cannot be? She looked up at me, almost as if she was really looking at me for the first time. This woman is more than she appears. Now shit. After a moment's pause, Purple Snoot Lady said, I am Egungun-oya, goddess of divination, mother of the spirits of the ancestral dead. 15 years ago, I'd have hit the intercom and asked for a psych consult from the hospital staff. But working for Ayesha, I'd seen some shit. What's that mean exactly? The smirk came back. For one thing, that your weapon is useless. I cannot die by mortal means. What I can do is sense the time of a person's death. If they are one of my people, I can see their deaths down to the second. But for all mortals, I may at least sense the general time and place. I can sense yours, for example. That was not something I expected to be talking about today. I don't suppose it's in the next 5 minutes? It is not. You have many years left to you. Wasn't sure how I felt about that. I guess it depended on how she defined many. But I've been around for nearly 50 years, the adult parts of which were in one of 3 dangerous jobs. Buying it unexpectedly was a known risk. So, I'll take many. However, the officer of the law seated outside will die next year. Poor Officer Tafoya. And then again, it was a known risk for him, too. Fine, I lowered my weapon, but I didn't holster it just yet. I'm guessing you can't sense her death? No, I cannot. You know what she is. She's an immortal. Been around for centuries. Even got written about by H. Rider Haggard in the 19th century in a really shitty novel called She. Haggard made her white, though. Realization spread over Egungun-oya's face. This is the infamous She who must be obeyed. Yeah. I had thought you to be fictional. It appears I was both right and wrong. Mind telling me why you're here? Egungun-oya let out a long breath. The bombing. Zuri Jones, the owner of the Kusama bookstore, is one of my people. She summoned me in order to inform me that the head of Yadi Industries is corrupt and was probably responsible for the bombing, wishing to collect on the insurance money. She would never have done that to that building. Are you saying she is incapable of such an act? Oh, she's totally capable. But she wouldn't do it to a building that had a community center and a bookstore focused on books by black folks. Besides which, she didn't own the building anymore. Zuri Jones was under the impression that she did. Yadi Industries doesn't even need that building, really. She bought it so she could use it to support black businesses. And then she sold it to a real estate company whose CEO and CFO are black. Then who is responsible? My people cry out for vengeance, and I will have it. I swallowed. Maybe this lady really was a goddess, and after a decade and a half of Ayesha's nutsy life, I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, especially given that she got into this room without anyone seeing and knew my name without my telling her. Now I did holster my 9mm. Fucked if I know who's responsible, I just got here, but I'm gonna dig into it. I rubbed my chin and thought for a minute. Tell you what, meet me back here tomorrow, same time. Maybe we'll be lucky and Ayesha will be awake. We can compare notes. I have other business to attend to, so this is acceptable. Good. I heard the door click. I turned to see a nurse entering the room. Turning back around, Egungun-oya was gone. Son of a bitch. At a press conference on Germantown Avenue today, Mark Strunk, an aide to the governor, was joined by Ty Simmons, the brother of Ron Simmons, who was one of the victims of the bombing of the building that included the bank's community center, which the Simmons brothers ran together. Strunk had this to say about the bombing. We are, of course, outraged at this horrific attack on the African-American community in the city of brotherly love. Rest assured, we will be monitoring the Philadelphia PD and FBI's investigation closely to make sure that the perpetrators of this vicious crime are prosecuted to the full extent of the law. In addition, Ty Simmons took the podium to tearfully discuss his brother. I just want to say that my brother was a great man. He was a a leader in our community, and he shouldn't have died like that. It ain't right. It ain't right. None of this is right. FBI agents have been sighted at the crime scene, but neither they nor the Philly PD have made an official statement as yet. We'll have more on this story as it develops here on Channel 6 Action News. Ayesha was awake 24 hours later, for which I was grateful. But Egungun-oya beat me to the hospital room, for which I really wasn't. I've been hoping to get my boss alone before we dealt with the goddess. Today's officer on guard duty, an Officer Lafferty, let me in to see the two immortal women talking. Egungun-oya was wearing the same outfit she had on yesterday, except she had a purple shawl that matched the snood draped over her shoulders. Ayesha was sitting up in bed, but still had most of the tubes and wires and such. The intubation tube was gone, though. "Ah, Francesca," she said in a ragged whisper. Intubation tubes are a gift that keeps on giving. As I came in, "It's good to see you." "Good to see you up and about." "Well, up in any event." She stretched, yanking her arms up toward the ceiling. "It has been several decades since I was in the midst of an explosion of that magnitude. However, medical practices have improved tremendously since then." "You hardly need them," Egungun-oya said gently. "Oh, yes, I do." Ayesha's voice intensified, sounding like a jeep driving over glass. "I still feel pain, still suffer injury. I still cannot die from it. It is not always a blessing." Egungun-oya turned to face me. "You must talk sense into her." I snorted. "Evidence to date suggests that's beyond my means." "What I propose does make sense," Ayesha said. "One of the reasons why I've never been found out is because I've always known when to cut my losses. This is one of those times." Glowering at her, I said, "First of all, I found you out 15 years ago. Secondly, what do you mean by cut my losses in this context exactly?" "You might recall that I requested several years ago that you fashion an identity for a daughter of mine, Ursula. Given the complicated matter of such things in these modern times, I thought it might take some time to do so." "Yeah, it's almost done. Why?" "I believe it would be best if Ayesha Yati were to join the other casualties of the bombing. Then wait in court for a few years until my daughter has come of age, and then to retake control of the businesses as Ursula. And the throne as well." Before I could even start to come up with a response to that, Egungun-oya said, "And what of the perpetrators of this foul crime? Do you not wish vengeance against them?" "That is what law enforcement agencies are for. I'm sure Francesca's former associates in the FBI will find the perpetrators." I winced. "Yeah, I wouldn't count on that." Egungun-oya raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" She put a lot of menace into that syllable. I shuddered for a second and then went on. "Most of my former associates aren't with the Bureau anymore, either. Some retired, some went to other agencies, and a lot of them quit in disgust after the election last year. I had a drink last night with Eddie McGoran, my old ASAC. My old boss," I added at the women's confused look when I used the acronym for Assistant Special Agent in Charge. Ayesha frowned. "I recall you speaking well of him." "Yeah, well, he put in his retirement papers after Trump got elected and retired to Mapleshade. But he's still got friends in the Bureau, and he told me last night that the going theory is that Simmons' brother did it." "And you do not believe him to be responsible?" Egungun-oya asked. "Supposedly, there's some financial nonsense, but I don't see Ty Simmons bombing 3 black-owned businesses, including a community center, just to avoid an embezzlement investigation. Especially when one of the 5 people who died is his own brother. Besides, there's been a massive uptick in attacks on black people and black-owned businesses, and this is probably part of that." "All the more reason," Ayesha said, "to cut our losses. I've been considering it since the events in Ferguson in March. And after this?" Putting her hands on her hips, Egungun-oya gave Ayesha a look that made me want to hide under the bed. "You would run away rather than confront those who harmed your people." "I was the only one of my people in the offices," Ayesha said tartly. "And what of the people in the community center?" Egungun-oya's voice was low and intense, and I swore I thought the glass in the window looking out onto Ontario Street would shatter from the sheer fury that was coming off of her. "The 5 who died, and the dozen besides yourself who were hurt?" Ayesha, though, was completely unaffected, which just figured. "People die, often sooner than they should, but not me. If you expect me to be moved by mortals proving themselves to be mortal, then your expectations will be dashed." "Then why did you purchase that building?" Frowning, Ayesha asked, I beg your pardon? Beg all you wish, but I shall not pardon you in the least. Why did you purchase that building? I smiled, as I was pretty sure I knew where our new goddess friend was going with this. I needed office space. Ayesha was practically pouting. There is office space in the downtown region of this city. Instead, you chose to locate your offices in a neighborhood populated by people who descend from Africans, from our people. You rented the additional space to a bookstore dedicated to the literature of our people, and to a community center servicing the needs of our people. And then you sold the building to a company operated by our people. Why did you do that? Because our people need to be supported, Ayesha said quietly. But I've done that, repeatedly, and I will not be caught on the wrong end of the cycle. I stared at her. Cycle? Progress is not linear, Francesca. It comes in fits and starts. This nation elects a man of color to be president for the first time in its history, and then the next man they elect is a white supremacist. Things are worse now for our people. Of course they aren't, Egungun-oya said dismissively. Oh, you are correct in that there is a certain amount of backsliding, but in every measurable sense, the world is a better place now than it was at any time in the past. Not just for our people, but for all people. That does not mean that the world is a good place for all, and it does not mean that there isn't a very long way to go before things are as they should be. I have been alive even longer than you, Queen Ayesha of Kor, and I know that the world is less brutal, less dangerous than ever it was. Mortals live longer and healthier. Fewer people live in slavery. The healing arts are finer, and there is greater tolerance among those who are different from each other. My cell phone buzzed, and I pulled it out of my purse. Egungun-oya went on. This is not to say that progress is finished. There are still many who suffer, many who discriminate, many who dominate unfairly and undeservedly, many who judge others by irrelevant criteria, which is why we must fight. Because these improvements did not just occur on their own. They came from mortals struggling. I have seen their struggles, seen them bear fruit, see them continue. And when those who participate in that struggle have their too short lives snuffed out sooner than they should, it must be answered. We do not even know who is responsible, Ayesha said dismissively. Actually, we do, I said, having read the text message I got from one of my security people. Frost Lamba Enterprises, the company you sold the building to? What of them? Ayesha asked. They just signed off on a letter of intent to sell the property the building was on to the Pettit Development Group. Shrugging, Ayesha said, So? It is a wise move. The land will need to be developed. Yeah, but Pettit has been buying up land all over Germantown, including a lot of buildings near ours. But FLE wouldn't budge on selling it because they knew you wouldn't go for it. This was for land? Maybe. Here's the kicker. The majority stockholder of Pettit is Mark Strunk, the same guy who's been doing photo ops on this thing all week, supposedly on the governor's behalf. Egungun-oya stared angrily at Ayesha. We must confront this man. We? If you wish to confront him, leave me out of it. I will return to Kor and hide? Avoid your responsibilities to your people? My people are safe! Ayesha cried, and then had a nasty coughing fit. When she recovered, she spoke more quietly. Even now, when Kor is known to the outside world, my people are safe. How fortunate for your people, Egungun-oya said. Would that your neighbors had been so lucky when men from Europe came and plundered them for resources both monetary and human. Ayesha turned to look at me. Do you believe as this fool of a goddess does? Well, I ain't thrilled at the notion of you dying, because then it means I'm out of a job. It does not. I will still require your services when I take on the role of my own daughter. I nodded my head. Fine, but I still don't like it. And she's right, things are better in the aggregate. You don't see things like the New Orleans lynching in 1891. Why do you mention that one in particular, Francesca? Because it was the worst single mass lynching in the history of this country. 11 people, all hung together because of their ancestry, not because of anything they did. Here's the thing. They weren't black. They were Italians. I was unaware of that, Ayesha said quietly. I was, Egungun-oya said. Many of my people are in New Orleans, and I was present for both David Hennessy's death and the unfounded accusations against the local Italian population that followed. My point is, I said, the world sucks. But it sucks less now, and it'll suck more if you don't take down those assholes that bombed your building. If you disappear, Ayesha, then they might get away with it. Or Egungun-oya here will take care of it, but I'm guessing whatever you do won't be very public. Hardly. We gods survive by functioning in the shadows, summoned by whispered prayers and subtle spells. Right, but if Queen Ayesha Yadi of Kor, her own damn self, exposes them publicly, it'll mean something. Ayesha sat for a whole bunch of seconds on that bed, just staring into space. Finally, very well. Where can we find this Mark Strunk? Two sets of protesters were demonstrating on Germantown Avenue near the site of the recent bombing. Philadelphia PD officers were charged with keeping order and keeping the two sides separate. On the north side of the street, the local Black Lives Matter chapter has organized a demonstration showing support for Ron Simmons and the 4 others who died in the Banks Community Center, including 2 children, as well as for the popular Kusomo bookstore and for Yadi Industries. While most of the participants were people of color, there were several white and Asian faces visible on the north side of the street as well. Channel 6 caught up with Zuri Jones, the owner of the Kusomo bookstore, who was also participating in the protest. This was an attack on our people. It was an attack on our past by targeting the books in my store. It was an attack on our present by destroying the center of our community here in Germantown. And it was an attack on our future by targeting the children of our neighborhood. But we will not stand idly by. We will have justice. The other protesters did not identify with any particular group, but were entirely made up of white men and were carrying placards with slogans favored by the members of the so-called alt-right. Only 2 of those protesters were willing to speak to Channel 6. Roy Simmons was a Muslim terrorist in that community center? Yeah, it was a beep in mosque. That was just business as usual for our great nation, weeding out terrorists. Yadi Industries bankrolled it, and they used that bookstore to pass messages to each other. I bet those jerks across the street protested when they killed bin Laden, too. The people protesting across the way are a bunch of SJWs who think they matter, but they don't. The Lord has called down fire from heaven to destroy them. Meanwhile, the FBI has said that they are pursuing several leads, and Channel 6 has also learned that Roy Simmons' brother, Ty, has been brought into the FBI offices in the William J. Green Jr. building on Arch Street, though it's not clear if he is a suspect or if he is simply being questioned. By the time Ayesha was strong enough to be let out of the hospital, which was only 2 days later, to the complete confusion of every medical professional in the place, I'd found out 2 things. One was that the FBI wasn't even looking at Strunk. I tried to get an appointment with the head of the Philadelphia field office to show her their financial connections, but nobody returned my phone calls. McGoran had tried to get me in too. He still had some pull in the bureau, but no luck. The other was that Strunk owned a house in Phoenixville. He'd been renting an apartment in Harrisburg since he got the gig with the governor, but he was from the Philly area originally. He was having a Sunday outdoor barbecue party the day after Ayesha got out of the hospital. According to one of my sources, 2 of the guests were from the local Proud Boys chapter. It was warm and sunny as I drove Ayesha up to Strunk's house. Egungun-oya was already waiting for us when we parked near the end of the line of cars parked in front of the large neo-colonial house. I could hear the solid wall of sound that was obviously human voices, but too far away to make out any words. Without a word, the 3 of us walked down the driveway and then to the side of the garage to the back of the house. We probably looked pretty weird. A short Italian-American woman in a blue blazer and matching pants over a tank top and my shoulder holster, flanked by 2 elegant African women. Egungun-oya had on the same outfit she'd had on in the hospital. Ayesha was wearing a wig of kinked red hair and a dark green pantsuit. As we came nearer, the mouth-watering aroma of grilled chicken, hot dogs, and hamburgers surrounded us. Once we were alongside the garage, I could make out voices. It's pandering is all it is. Shit like that is just trying to get rid of us altogether. Like we didn't do everything in civilization, you know? Right! Who landed on the moon? Who fought all the wars? A whole bunch of white men, and 1 or 2 white women, were sitting around the backyard in lawn chairs and around a big round redwood table. As soon as the three of us walked in, the place got real quiet. Strunk was standing over the grill. On TV, he always wore a tailored suit that hid his pot belly and made his short-cropped dark hair look sophisticated. Today, he was wearing a t-shirt, khaki shorts, and flip-flops that made him look like a fat, middle-aged white guy. Sweat was beading on his forehead and his chubby cheeks. "Can I help you, ladies?" he asked. One of the guests muttered, "They're obviously lost." My boss stepped forward. "My name is Ayesha Yadi." I gotta give Strunk credit. He recognized the name and immediately went all politician on us. Bowing his head, he said, "Your Majesty, what brings you to my home?" "I'm led to understand that you're purchasing the building on Germantown Avenue that was firebombed earlier this week." Glancing nervously to one side, Strunk handed the spatula to a young man next to him. Said, "Jonathan, take over the grill, would you please?" Turning to the guest, he said, "Governor's aide's work is never done, folks. Give me a few." Back to us. "Come on inside. We can discuss this in private." We followed him through a sliding glass door into a pleasantly air-conditioned living room with a big, ugly couch, a matching ugly easy chair, plush carpeting that was right out of the 70s, and a huge TV mounted to the wall over a fireplace. "First of all, Your Majesty, I want to express my sympathies for what happened. I was led to understand that you were injured in the explosion. Oh, I must say, you seem to be in good..." "My status is irrelevant," Ayesha said. "Your company has been attempting to buy real estate in Germantown for months. Frost Lambert was unwilling to sell the building to you until the bombing." Strunk smirked. "Strictly speaking, it's not the building, it's the land on it. Well, I mean, building isn't much to speak of now, is it?" Egungun-oya stepped forward. "You find this a laughing matter, Mark William Strunk." Sorry, who are you?" Ayesha said, "She is here representing the interests of the Kusoma bookstore." "No offense, Your Majesty, but the Kusoma bookstore doesn't exist anymore. I'm sure the insurance will take care of the store. As for Pettit, yes, I own stock in it, and they have plans for the neighborhood, from what I understand." The sliding door opened to two of the guests, both wearing muscle shirts and shorts, though only one of them filled the shirt out, if you know what I mean. The smaller one said, "Hey, Mark, what's going on?" Holding up a hand toward them without even looking at the pair, Strunk said, "Nothing to worry about, Jack. I'll be out in a bit." "These bitches got no business being here," the big one said. Now Strunk did look at him. "I said it's nothing to worry about, Fred. Go back outside." Fred stepped forward. "Don't fucking tell me what to do, Mark." "It's my house, Fred," Strunk said, though he was shrinking a bit. Egungun-oya stared at Fred. "This is not your business. Or is it?" "Excuse me?" Fred turned his nasty gaze on the Yoruba goddess. "Why don't you take your daishiki-wearing asses back into the ghetto and let us have our party in peace, huh?" Strunk said, "This is business, Fred." Jack spoke up then. "It's Sunday, Mark. Day of rest. God didn't have to do no work on Sunday, so you're sure as hell don't. These three bitches got business. Let them come to your office." Fred sneered. "What business is it anyhow? Trying to defund the police or some shit?" Egungun-oya said, "We are here to discuss the bombing on Germantown Avenue." That got Fred to guffaw. He was close enough now that I could smell the beer on his breath. "Yeah, that was some awesome. You ever been to that bookstore? Shittiest books ever written in that place. And that community center was just a place for you people to get drunk." Ayesha smiled. "Better to do that at the house of your friend?" Pointing a finger at Ayesha, Fred said, "Watch your mouth, bitch. We go get some of the same..." He cut himself off, but both he and Jack looked nervous. So did Strunk. "That's enough, Fred. Go back outside. I'll be out in a minute." "No," Ayesha said. "I would rather they stay. Please, finish your sentence." "Excuse me?" Fred asked in a much quieter voice. Egungun-oya said, "You threatened us with some of the same, Frederick Meyer. Some of the same what?" Jack asked, "How the hell you know his name?" "I know many things, Marion John Becker." Fred whirled on Jack. "Your fucking name's Marion?" "Dad named me after John Wayne." "And how did you know that?" he asked Egungun-oya. "Few places are close to me, but one such is the mind of Frederick Meyer. I ask again, some of the same what?" "Don't say a word," Strunk said nervously. "Why are you concerned?" Ayesha asked. "Is it because your real estate goals were furthered by the bombing?" Jack whirled on Strunk. "Real estate? What the hell, Mark?" Fred added, "You never said nothing about real estate, just that piece of shit building was a symbol of..." "Shut up!" Strunk cried out. "Why shut up?" "I agree with you!" Fred yelled. "Blowing up that shithole was the best thing that could have happened. Teach those folks not to fuck with our country." Both Ayesha and Egungun-oya turned on Fred. Ayesha said, "So you admit to bombing my building?" "So what if I did?" Fred asked, thrusting his jaw out. Egungun-oya gave Fred a small smile that scared the shit out of me. Fred, though, wasn't quite bright enough to be scared by it. "This explains much." "Explains what, bitch?" "I can sense the general time of a person's death. Yours is 18 months from now, in a prison, following 3 injections of chemicals into your bloodstream." Everyone was looking at Fred, but it was Jack who lost it at that. He screamed and lunged right at Ayesha before I could stop him. They went tumbling ass over tea kettle onto the couch and then onto the coffee table in front of it. I heard a nasty crack as I leapt over the couch to grab Jack and pull him off Ayesha. She was laying on the carpeted floor, her head at an impossible angle. Strunk was now drenched in even more sweat in the AC than he had been standing in the sun over a grill. Oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God. I got Jack in an arm lock, but he was struggling like crazy. Shit, Jack, Fred was saying. You didn't have to kill the bitch. Not that it's a loss or nothing, but... No. Strunk was muttering, and he went to a sideboard near the fireplace. There was a landline on it. This can't happen. Thought he was going to use that phone to call the police, but instead he opened a drawer and pulled a revolver out, pointing it at Egungun-oya. I'm sorry, Strunk said, still sweating but sounding calm. But this can't get out. What the fuck, Mark? Fred was screaming now. You said it was all about cleaning up the neighborhood with fire, like the Bible says. The fuck is this? I still had Jack in the arm lock, and he'd stopped struggling once Strunk took the weapon out. What's your plan here, Strunk? I asked. You broke into my house. I was defending myself. And broke the neck of a head of state. Good luck selling that. Regrettable, but she was obviously delirious from her injuries, or perhaps misled by the two women with her. Egungun-oya was shaking her head. You're a sad and foolish man, Mark William Strunk. Smirking, Strunk said, I've been called worse by better people than you. He cocked the hammer with a click. See, that is your mistake, Mark William Strunk. And what's that? You mistake me for a person. Not for much longer, he said, and then pulled the trigger. The report was deafening in the small room, and the bullet seemed to fire right at Egungun-oya. But it didn't appear to hit anything. It whizzed through the air toward her, and then it just disappeared as it struck her. What the fuck? Fred cried out. From the floor, a ragged voice said, Ow, my neck! I kept my eye on Strunk. I knew what was happening, but everyone else turned to the sound of her voice. Ayesha stood up. You will regret that decision, she said to Jack. To Strunk, Egungun-oya said, As will you. She started toward him. Strunk's lips quivered, and then he just started screaming and firing his weapon at Egungun-oya 5 more times. After that, he kept on dry-clicking the revolver until Egungun-oya was standing right in front of him, the revolver's muzzle pressed against her chest. I am Egungun-oya. I speak for the dead who cry out for vengeance. She continued to stare at him. For a quick second, it looked like her eyes glowed. He stared back, still holding the revolver against her chest. His eyes glowed too. Then he lowered both the weapon and his head. Egungun-oya turned to face Ayesha and me. It is finished. We may leave now. It is not remotely finished, Ayesha said. But we are done here, I agree. I loosened my grip on Jack's arm and tossed him to the couch. He leapt up from the couch and ran away from me, hiding behind Fred's bigger form. Crazy bitch! Fred, though, just looked completely confused. The fuck just happened? Let us depart, Ayesha said to me. Fine by me. As we walked through the living room to a hallway into the front door, I heard Fred cry out, Yeah, you better run! We don't take shit from bitches here! In a stunning development, Mark Strunk, a longtime aide to the governor, resigned today prior to turning himself into the FBI and confessing to helping orchestrate the bombing on Germantown Avenue last week. Strunk called a press conference, to which federal agents were invited, and after resigning and explaining why, turned himself into the agents while cameras were rolling. Here's part of what he had to say. I deeply regret my actions, which led to so many deaths, as well as to the destruction of a great bookstore, an important community center, and corporate offices. My actions are unforgivable, as are the actions of those whom I instructed. Strunk did not name his co-conspirators during his press conference, but in a statement released shortly afterward, FBI spokesperson Kelly Lashner said that Strunk is fully cooperating and arrests of the actual bombers are imminent. One of the victims was Queen Ayesha of the African nation of Kor, whom Channel 6 caught up with at Philadelphia International Airport. I am glad to hear that Mr. Strunk has found his conscience, though it's too late for the 5 people who died at his hands, as well as for those who, like myself, were badly injured. Indeed, I am still recovering, and I'm about to fly home to Kor to recuperate. But my head of security, Francesca Lamanna, will be monitoring this investigation very closely to make sure that justice for my people is meted out. In other news, violence erupted in the college town of Charlottesville, Virginia over the weekend as the so-called Unite the Right rally against the removal of a Confederate statue was met with a counter-protest. One Unite the Right member has been arrested following his driving his vehicle into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing one of them. And that's the end. Double Trouble is available from whatever your online book dealer of choice is, Amazon, BN.com, whatever. It's available in trade paperback, hardcover, and will shortly be available in ebook as well. Please, if you enjoyed this, feel free to leave comments. Feel free to buy the book and review it on Amazon or on Goodreads. Feel free to buy my other books, and all that good stuff. Thank you very much for watching. Next month, I'm gonna read my other summer 2023 release, which is The Thick Blue Line in Sherlock Holmes Cases by Candlelight, Volume 2. And that'll be on August 15th. Thank you very much for watching. Please stay safe, and I'll see you next month. Bye.